Hi, everyone. Welcome to the NSF funding webinar from the Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences Directorate. We have Dr. Kelly Craig Henderson here, who will be giving the presentation. And we'll start off with an introduction from Dr. Billy Jack, who is the Vice Provost for Research. So Billy, if you would like to say a few words, please go ahead.
Thanks, Jesse. Good morning, everyone. And especially good morning to Dr. Craig Henderson. Thank you so much for joining us. It's easier to join us this way, I guess, than if we invited you to come to campus. But still, I know the time constraints we impose on you are the same. And we're very grateful for you making this time. May I also say that I'm very grateful to Jesse Sito for organizing this event and helping us explore new ways to expand our research portfolio here on campus. As well as welcoming the Georgetown faculty and staff who are with us. I'd like to offer welcome our colleagues from across the DC area who've joined us. We've done this a couple of times under Jesse's direction at Georgetown, and I'm delighted to have others involved in this event. Brief introduction to Kelly Craig Henderson. She's the Deputy Assistant Director for the Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences Directorate of the NSF. Previously, she'd served as the Deputy Division Chief of the Social and Economic Sciences Division of SBE before transitioning into the role of Director of the NSF's Tokyo Regional Office. I have to admit, I didn't know that the NSF had a Tokyo regional office, so I've learned something already. Dr. Craig Henderson was, I should say, a professor of psychology at Howard University and has brought to the NSF her passion for broadening the participation of underrepresented groups. So I really celebrate that passion, and I'm grateful for it. And I think we can all learn something here at Georgetown from that. And I hope, contribute to that broadening of the spectrum of people involved in STEM fields and social behavioral economic areas in particular. So thank you so much again for joining us. I look forward to hearing what you have to say, of course. And I especially look forward to our faculty taking this opportunity and digging deeper into it. I might just add for our home audience, I encourage people in the social and the economic and behavioral sciences to reach out to their cluster research administrators. They're the people who can direct you towards NSF opportunities, etc. We have Elisa Mata and Marisa D'Angelo in particular at McCourt who are available, as well as our other CRAs. So please use them to exploit the opportunities that Dr. Craig Henderson will no doubt tell us about today. So again, thanks very much for joining us, and over to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. And just a point of correction, we no longer have an international footprint. So while I was formerly the head of the office that facilitated international connections with researchers in the East Asia region, that office has since been closed, as has the other two international offices we once had, one in Europe, which was there to facilitate those kinds of international partnerships. And then the third office we used to have was in Beijing in China, which was also a very strong mediator for those kinds of research partnerships. And they have all since been closed. So onward and upward. I'm here this morning to share some information about funding opportunities with you. And Jesse was very helpful in preparing an opportunity for me to look over some of the preliminary questions that some of you submitted. And I'm going to try to answer each of those and also just give you some background information about the current funding priorities, and also spend a little bit of time just going through some of the mechanisms, or I should say not mechanisms, but mechanics in submitting the proposal, what does a competitive, strong proposal look like? And hopefully you'll find that to be helpful. So I'm gonna share a bunch of slides with you, and I'm happy to entertain your questions. If they're pressing ones, Jesse will kind of introduce and interrupt, but otherwise we'll hold those to the end, okay? So here we go. Let's begin. Okay, I'm having difficulty advancing my slides. That's not a good start. All right.
Mami, ¿está en el proyecto?
Okay, here we go. Sorry. Here we go. So in starting off, I understand that there are many of you joining us from many different places. This is one of the silver linings of the pandemic, that we've had to go virtual. So we are now able to be joined by colleagues from a broad range of universities, institutions, many in the area, some a little further away. And these are just the institutions that you see here that I was able to get a sense of from the those of you who indicated your affiliation. So welcome to you all, and I hope that this will be helpful as we proceed. So NSF, the National Science Foundation, is an independent federal agency. Some people don't realize that because of the title. It is the National Science Foundation, and they often think it's a private foundation, but this is in fact a federal agency that's located within the executive branch, which means it's underneath the president. And we go back to 1950, at which point the National Science Foundation was stood up. And it had a focused mission to assist the government and the United States in advancing prosperity through research and also supporting defense. So that mission is still with us today, and it is the framework in which we operate. Our budget annually is about, most recently, $8.1 billion. And you might say, wow, that's a lot of money. And it is. It is about a fifth of the budget size for the National Institutes of Health. So that gives you a sense of where we are relative to what we think of as a sister agency. The foundation is currently led and governed by a board, a National Science Board, as well as a director. And the director is on site with the foundation itself in the building and is the day-to-day leader for the organization. And he works in concert with the National Science Board, which is a congressionally appointed and approved group of expert scientists from across the disciplines of areas that NSF supports. And they convene quarterly. And so there's quite a bit of communication that goes on between the National Science Board and the director. Our director, Dr. Setharaman Panchanathan, has just come on board about a month, maybe about 5 weeks ago. And we're delighted to have him on board. He was a former NSB, that is National Science Board member. And we're looking forward to a future with him. The NSF is arranged. Jesse, do you have a question? You're muted.
No. I meant to applaud for the new director. Sorry about that. Please go ahead.
That's fine. The NSF is arranged in some ways like your universities, in the sense that we have directorates which have disciplinary foci. So the biological sciences are in one directorate. The computer and information science and engineering is in another area. And then the directorate which I'm representing is the Social, Behavioral, and Economic Science Directorate. And this is about, my remarks will really be tailored to the interest of investigators, researchers, faculty who are represented in that broad swath of disciplines, economics, political science, psychology, sociology, some of the interdisciplinary areas involving law and social sciences, for example. However, I just wanted to give you a sense of how the foundation is organized. And the directorates tend to have the research focus. The offices, there are several offices, help us to manage and operate as a federal agency. These are the broad areas that are the science areas that NSF supports. We like to say that we support all areas of science and engineering and education as well. And so you can find a home. I know some of the questions that came in from those of you who submitted questions beforehand had to do with the challenge of identifying the right program. And I understand that. It is a challenge. As a former researcher, when I was on the faculty, I remember struggling to find a home for research that I was conducting at the time. And quite frankly, only learned of the existence of the program once I came on board to NSF, that was in fact a program that would have been ideal for that research. And so hopefully I'll be able to help you with that today. That's my intent at least. Okay, so let's, just a little bit of background information. The NSF supports a large amount of the basic science that's conducted at American universities and colleges. And you can see from this slide how that breaks down percentage-wide across the different disciplines. I've highlighted the social, psychological, behavioral area here. And so we can say, I think, fairly accurately that the social behavioral sciences at NSF support close to 70% of the basic science that's conducted at American universities and colleges. Of course, our budget, and I didn't bother putting a slide up for that, but the budget for the SBE Directorate is the smallest of the research directorates. And that is something that we're, continuously struggling against and trying to up and push. And we do a lot of outreach to our stakeholders to assure them of the value of the public value of the work that we are supporting and the value of the investments we make in social behavioral economic sciences. It has been a challenge, but I think we are well positioned now to grow our budget, and hopefully we'll be able to do that in the next few years. The SBE Directorate at NSF recently underwent what we called a repositioning, and that allowed us to make substantial changes to, I think, about 9 of our programs, so that the value of those programs was more apparent and more in line with the investments we've been making in those particular areas. So, for example, the law and social science program had been changed to now reflect what it's been funding all these years, law and science. It's a law and science program. And there are other changes that were more substantial across several other programs that I'm happy to go into later if you have questions about that. We are organized according to division. So each directorate at NSF has divisions. Our directorate has 3 divisions. 2 of them are research divisions. One of them is a federal statistical agency. So anyone on this call is familiar with having filled out some form of a questionnaire asking about your accomplishments in terms of education, whether it was at the undergraduate level or the graduate level. There was a survey that you filled out at some point in your training, and that data is collected by the National Center for Science and Engineering Statistics. That center is one of our divisions. They are also the federal clearinghouse for all of the information and reports and trends regarding science and engineering, the enterprise of science and engineering in the United States. And they're also very helpful for international comparisons as well. The Science and Engineering Indicators is a report that they produce every other year that many of you or your institutions are probably very familiar with, and use some of the data there as benchmarks to gauge your progress in awarding certain degrees and bringing certain groups through the academic pipeline. So they produce that. They also produce a very important report on the engagement of women, minorities, and people with disabilities in the science and engineering enterprise. And that comes out every 2 years as well. Another important source of information. The research divisions that are included in our directorate include the many of the traditional disciplines that you would think of for the social behavioral economic sciences, like sociology and economics, but they also include a number of interdisciplinary areas that we support research in. So for example, we have the science of organizations. We have perception, action, and cognition. We have decision, risk, and management sciences. These are all areas which fund research that crosses various disciplinary boundaries and are important investments in our portfolio. And so you can see these programs I've put up on the slide here, but I'm happy to talk about some of them if you have questions. The other part of the directorate, which I should mention, is the Office of Multidisciplinary Activities, and it's kind of like a virtual division, and it is the part of the directorate that supports more directorate-wide funding mechanisms and activities like the research experiences for undergraduates. Some of you on the call might have some experiences with those programs. They're wonderful ways of getting your undergraduate students involved in and engaged in the research enterprise. And they have a set a standing date for when you can submit proposals and various budget constraints that direct the kind of research that you might be interested in engaging undergraduates in. It's I think a very interesting opportunity, particularly for faculty who teach undergraduates and would like them to be more engaged in the research enterprise. And then we have several other programs out of this multidisciplinary division that have directorate-wide relevance, such as the Science of Science program and the SBE Postdoctoral Research Fellowship Program. And that is a program that some of you might also be interested in for your graduate students who, as they're finishing up, may want to be involved in a postdoctoral experience with a mentor who is at another institution. So if they've identified someone in their field who would be exciting to work with, who would help them kind of transition their work into another level so that they're competitive as an assistant professor, they may want to consider doing this. This is a nice opportunity to enable them to have support to do their work and to be affiliated with a researcher in the field of interest. All of these are opportunities that you can find more information about on our website. I put this up here. This is the cover page of the most recent report. I mentioned the National Center for Science and Engineering's report that they put out every other year on the engagement of women, minorities, and people with disabilities in the science enterprise. And this is the cover of the most recent report. It's chock full of information and extremely useful. So I'm going to shift gears now, and I want to just say a little bit about the National Science Foundation's engagement in the the challenge that we're all faced with this COVID-19 pandemic. NSF was, I think, very active at the outset. We continue to be active, actually. I shouldn't say was, but we were involved at the beginning and involved in supporting research investments that would enhance our understanding of how to wrestle with the conditions of this pandemic. And so the foundation received an additional appropriation to enable support of awards having to do with the pandemic, and the Social Behavioral Economic Science Directorate received $9.5 million extra dollars to support rapid research awards. Now, the rapid awards are awards that are made in the face of urgent conditions when the data is likely to be ephemeral. And so these are circumstances that demand support for research for which we don't have the time to engage in the traditional review process, which, by the way, takes approximately 6 months, up to 6 months, 4 to 6 months. So the mechanism allows investigators to submit important competitive research ideas, have the proposal be reviewed internally, and then receive funding in a very rapid manner, hence the title, the Rapid Award Funding Mechanism. And we have utilized this mechanism in the face of other kinds of emergencies, catastrophes that have happened, and certainly the current pandemic meets that criteria. And we supported in the SBE Directorate, and these numbers are about a month old, so when it's all said and done, they probably go up a little bit in terms of the number of awards, but the data I'm reporting on now is from about 73 awards that were funded by the appropriation we received. But program officers and division directors felt so strongly about the nature of the research that was coming in the door for this pandemic, or addressing the conditions of this pandemic, that they used monies that were appropriated for their core budgets to supplement many of these awards. And so we have up to 200 or so awards that we can point to in the wake of this pandemic that we've supported to advance our understanding of the basics around the social behavioral economics of the COVID-19 pandemic, totaling about $27 million. It was quite, and it continues to be quite, a massive undertaking to do this kind of funding in that short period of time. Program directors were working around the clock and nonstop to ensure that these awards were being made. You know, we are federal stewards and public servants, and I think at no time other than this was this made more apparent to me that the employees and staff at the National Science Foundation really took and take that mission seriously in their efforts to support the investments that were made during this time. I have a couple of slides. I won't go into detail, and frankly, I don't know a lot about them. Some of them come to my desk because of their particular visibility and resonance with what's going on around us at a particular time. But this is one example of a rapid award that was made to an investigator at the University of Memphis on systemic differences in employee outcomes from COVID-19 and the effectiveness of organizational response. And this focused on the, what we're all doing now, which is working remotely, and the way that this has affected people and the workforce, and the impacts of unemployment. I mean, it's a broad-reaching proposal, and this was funded. So we are very optimistic about the kind of information that will come out of many of these awards that we've supported. Another one briefly looked at the extent to which this social distancing has, well, they're capturing the way that social distancing is happening and the implications of that for people's daily interactions by using geolocated video diaries. So very interesting work, and again, likely to shed some important information about how people wrestled with this challenge during this time. Okay, so I'm shifting gears again. I told you it would be a lot, and I just want to be able to have some time available for some of your questions. Many of you may be aware of the big ideas that NSF launched in beginning in 2015, and we have 10 big ideas. That's what we've called them. And they're big ideas because they're meant to engage people from across disciplines working convergently to advance our understanding. So breaking down disciplinary boundaries, working together to answer long-standing questions, research questions that people have been wrestling with for years. And these big ideas have their genesis in conversations, workshops, conferences, consultation with advisory committees, a number of different stakeholders. And ultimately, these 10 big ideas have been huge investments that the foundation has made. Some of them were rolled out early on, and some have been rolled out a little bit later. So they have different degrees of completion at this point. But all of them received large inputs of money, upwards to about $30 million each over the various times that they were rolled out. And I have put this slide up here to give you a sense of the big ideas in which the Social Behavioral Economic Science Directorate has been most active, and in fact has played a leadership role. And these big ideas include what we've called harnessing data for the 21st century, science and engineering. The second big idea in which we played a leadership role is work at the human technology frontier, shaping the future. The third is navigating the new Arctic. And then the fourth is understanding the rules of life, predicting phenotype. These are all big ideas that we've played a big role in. And you know, they are, as I said, at various stages of completion. But if you're interested in seeing some of the work that has been supported by this, I have some steps at the end of my talk to guide you through how to get into the NSF portfolio and dig around and see what the abstracts look like for some of those projects. And maybe your work aligns with some of those interests. And then there are several other big ideas that are more process oriented, one of which we've been involved in as well, which is the NSF Includes big idea. And I'll say a little bit about each of these in a minute. Let's skip that. So harnessing the data revolution for the 21st century science and engineering. This is about the way that data is ubiquitous. It is in every form of our lives. And if you are a quantitatively oriented researcher, this is great news for you because there's so much potential in terms of what you can be studying and how you can be doing it. And so this particular big idea has spanned all of NSF directorates, as you can imagine, from the geosciences to the biological sciences to the social behavioral sciences. And of course, it's led in large part by our colleagues in the computer sciences. And so this is an opportunity, I think, that is available for researchers in the social behavioral economic sciences who have a particular quantitative focus, who are looking at data in ways that they that social scientists may not traditionally do so. But it comes with a $30 million pot of money, and we certainly would like to see social behavioral economic scientists engaged in this kind of work and taking a bit of that investment. The future of work at the human technology frontier is a big idea that has a lot of room for social behavioral economic scientists. This is about the way that work is changing. There have been many, many write-ups over the last 5, maybe even the last decade. People have been writing about how work and work life is changing with the adoption of computer technologies, with the increasing sophistication of artificial intelligence. How has this changed how people are working day to day, and the kinds of jobs that are available, and the kinds of interactions we're having with our colleagues, with our family members. And all of this is ripe for study within this big idea. We are also very interested in understanding better how to reskill and upskill workers and ensure that people are finding ways to utilize these technologies across the lifespan. So looking at the seniors' use of technologies is also of interest, obviously. Adolescents' usage, I mean, all of this is ripe for study. So if these are areas of interest to you, I would strongly encourage you to explore a little bit more about this big idea. The other, I have 2 more just briefly to mention in terms of the big ideas that we played a leadership role in. This third one here, navigating the new Arctic, is about the changing way that the changes underway in the Arctic, how those changes are impacting life around the globe. And so there are, I think it was in 2017 was the first year that it was possible for a ship to navigate the Arctic Strait in the absence of an icebreaker. because of the melting ice. And that's significant. It has opened up certain trade routes. So this is for you economists out there. It's created more opportunities for political engagement across our neighbors in the Arctic region. There are lots of questions that result from the changing patterns of the ice melting. We have migration of indigenous people underway that hasn't happened previously. And obviously this has implications for the environment, the natural environment, and how people interact with animals. There are polar bears in areas that people haven't seen previously. So lots of ripe opportunity for furthering research. This too comes with that $30 million price tag, and we would like to see continued engagement of our SBE colleagues and researchers in this area of work. And then finally, the last big idea I'll mention, for which we've played a role, is the rules of life, understanding the rules of life. And this really is an area that presents many opportunities for our colleagues in the neurosciences, the biological sciences, biological anthropology. This is an area of opportunity that I think can be useful, you know, if this is your disciplinary focus. So another big idea. And then finally, this big idea is one of the process ones. So less research in the way that the others have been kind of conceived and framed. This one is about process. It's about bringing in more people into the scientific pipeline and then leveraging the investments that we've made over time to expand the network of people who are engaged in the STEM enterprise. And you know, includes is actually an acronym. We've got a lot of acronyms at NSF. I've tried to spare you not speaking in that way because it's just like another language, but include stands for the inclusion across the nation of communities of learners that have been underrepresented discoverers in engineering and science. It's quite a mouthful. Just say includes, and you can find out by contacting a program director, looking at the webpage, all of the interesting opportunities that exist. It's an exciting way of creating a network. We began the Includes initiative, big idea, with design and development projects that individual investigators submitted proposals for. They had an idea for broadening participation. And then subsequent to that, we invited those participants to group together in interesting alliances, and then to submit proposals for alliances that would include investigators from teams of research projects. So you might have an alliance that consists of a faculty member at a university working in concert with a local museum, working in concert with an elementary school. And together they have come up with this proposed program that has opportunity and benefits an age group to go through in some way, some kind of educational pipeline. Very exciting work, and lots of different examples of projects that have been funded in this way. And now we're at the point of actually creating a network where the alliances are all working in some way together through a backbone organization that we have funded to kind of serve in that capacity. Very exciting. Last point about cross-directorate funding opportunities I'll make is this slide. And this slide just gives you an overview of some of the cross-directorate funding initiatives, opportunities that exist. Some of you asked about what our continuing or new priorities are. And so in addition to the big ideas, there are these mechanisms for funding work. Understanding the brain, secure and trustworthy cyberspace, smart and connected communities. These are all examples of funding initiatives that support cross-disciplinary research that involves review by a team of program directors from across the National Science Foundation. And so they are ongoing opportunities for funding. And if you think that your work falls within these areas, you should look at the website and follow the steps for communicating with a program director. I'll say a little bit more about how to specifically do that at the end. Some other mechanisms for funding work, if you're a faculty member and you have graduate students, you may be interested in the doctoral dissertation research improvement grants. Not all programs provide these, but a number of the programs in the SBE Directorate do. And these are awards that will allow your graduate students who are at the dissertation phase to receive support. You have to be involved in submission of that proposal because it's actually an award that has your name on it along with the graduate student. But it is meant to provide, I think, a useful mechanism to support graduate students who are working on their dissertations. There's also the postdoctoral research fellowship, which I mentioned earlier. These are for your, or if somebody's on the call who is finishing up or has just finished up their PhD, they are eligible for submitting a proposal for the postdoctoral research fellowship. And again, it provides a nice amount of support annually to enable the postdoctoral researcher to work closely with a mentor in the field. We'll provide you with travel to the location. The mentor has only to agree to mentor you, maybe provide you with a desk, and then we will provide you with the support to be affiliated with that department or that mentor for a prolonged period of time. And then there are the graduate research fellowships. These are highly competitive, and you may have heard about these in the news lately. These are this year focused on targeted areas that the administration has determined to be important areas, areas in which Americans are underrepresented, areas like quantum science, areas like artificial intelligence. And so given that the administration has asked us to focus the graduate research fellowships this year on those targeted areas. And those are opportunities for graduate students in their first and second years of graduate school. So if you're a faculty member, these are things to keep in mind as you're bringing new students on board. They are eligible to submit proposals for this early on in their graduate training. And then there are a number of other opportunities here that I've included here. The NRT program, which is sponsored or managed by our Education and Human Resource Directorate, as is the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program. And then there are standard investigator awards, which are the kinds of awards that most of you are thinking about and which I've been talking about. Happy to answer questions about these in our Q&A. The standard submission process, this is just don't get worried, don't get nervous. It's a little scary, I guess, but it really isn't meant to be. I just wanted to give you an overview of how it actually happens. We start with a program announcement or a solicitation that's out there. You read about it online, and then you submit a proposal. You communicate with the NSF program director, who then takes that proposal for review. And the review process typically involves a panel of reviewers as well as outside reviewers. And then the program officer puts all that together and comes up with a recommendation. And then they recommend the decision, whether it's to support or to decline. And then the division director has to review that recommendation, and they have to decide whether to agree with it or not. And then based on that, the recommendation goes forward to our Division of Grants and Agreement. The Division of Grants and Agreement is where the money is actually sent out. They have the authority to actually issue awards. And then the PI, the investigator, and their organization is contacted. So this is the overview of the process. And now I'm going to give you some specifics about each of these steps that will hopefully answer a number of your questions. The first thing you need to do is to review the programs that are available for funding. And that's easily done on our website. You go to our website, the SBE website within the National Science Foundation. You click on programs and you can get an overview of all of the programs that are available here. And you can kind of get a sense of whether your work would fall in there or not. Maybe you still have questions about that. So jot down the programs that seem most relevant to you and step away from that. And then get a sense of, find out who the program director is for each of these programs. That is listed on the website, the program director's name and email address. I strongly encourage you to use the email address, not the telephone number. Program directors at NSF are extremely conscientious about responding to emails, particularly emails from investigators who are inquiring about whether their work will fit, whether it's consistent with the scope of the program. And you should feel comfortable communicating with the program director. I think about my own research career, and when I was an assistant professor, I would have never, I was terrified of thinking about contacting the program director personally. Now I know that that was a big mistake on my part, that it was, it's something that you should do and something that program directors are waiting for. They are more than happy to communicate with you via email to answer your questions, because it will save you time and them time too if the idea you have in mind is better suited for another program. And you can read the synopsis of what the program supports. This is an example of the developmental science program's synopsis. So we have a program called Developmental Sciences within the SBE Directorate. And this is an outline of the kinds of descriptions, the level of description you'll get from the website. And you can, maybe this is enough information for you to determine whether this is relevant for your work or not. But for a lot of us, this is not enough information. And instead, it's necessary to reach out to the program director. And what I recommend you doing is to submit a single page, one page, that's all. Don't submit your dissertation. Don't submit your first chapter. Submit a single page of the research idea that you have, giving the program director a sense of the literature from which you're drawing. What literature is this based on? What are the previous research findings in this area? And what are you proposing to do? What's going to likely be the intellectual merit of this work, and what are the broader impacts? Now, those are our two merit review criteria, and I'll get to those in a minute. So once you have, I just include this here as another way of kind of zeroing in on whether you have identified the right program, is to look at some of the awards that were recently made. And I suggested this previously earlier on, but this is a good place to return to this, where on NSF's main website, you can go to funding and look for awards made. And you can put in keywords to bring up awards that have been made in certain broad areas or topic domains that interest you. And you can scroll through them, and these are all hyperlinked. So if you click on each one of these, you can in fact bring up an abstract of the proposal that was awarded, and the intellectual merit, the broader impacts, what are the outcomes of the work if it's old enough. Some of this is very recent, so you're not going to be able to see outcomes just yet, but you will get an abstract. And I think this is a very, very helpful way of getting a sense of the kind of work that's supported by a program. So I'd encourage you to look there as well. And then, yeah, this is the page I'm telling you. This is what it would look like online. If you've clicked onto one of those hyperlinks, you'll get an abstract that looks like this. And it'll give you a sense of who the program director was for that award, its duration, how long is it, how much money did the investigators get for it. All very helpful information. Now, if you're doing this yourself, the most important thing to do ahead of time is to read. I can't overstate that because it's just, it continues to floor us, you know, at these are very smart people. You are very smart researchers submitting very intellectually rich proposals, and yet not reading the instructions at times. And so I have to ask you to please be sure to pay attention, because if you mess up, you might not be able to have your proposal reviewed. So you've got to follow the instructions. And that means making sure that you're familiar with our award Policies and Procedures Guide. Now, many of you are from universities that have sponsored research offices who are going to handle this for you and who are going to help you walk through this. Some of you may not have that kind of benefit and will have to do a lot of this on your own. But this is an important first step before you submit a proposal, is familiarizing yourself with the guidance provided in our Proposal and Award Policies and Procedural Guide. Again, the consequence of not following these guidelines is that your proposal might be returned without review, and you don't want to lose that time if you've gone through the work of submitting a proposal. That would be devastating. Okay, so after you've identified the program of interest and you've narrowed down where you want to submit your proposal, as I think it is good to reach out to the program director. This is what I said earlier. And you email a one-page summary of your planned research project. And that one-page summary should include the intellectual merit and the broader impacts, our 2 review criteria. So maybe a paragraph of each in that single-page summary. And you want to talk to some of your colleagues, maybe some people in your department who have received NSF funding previously, or if it's too competitive to do it that way, maybe there are other people in your university who your sponsored research office can direct you to, who have submitted competitive proposals that have been funded. But it's useful to have somebody, you've got somebody in your network who can look over your idea and give you some feedback, just to make sure you're doing the best possible approach to investigating that question, that research question you have. And then you want to email that. And you can request a phone meeting in the email if it is a good fit. You can request with the program director that you have a phone call if you think that would be helpful. Okay, so as you begin the proposal, you want to obviously think about your budget. That's a very important part of the proposal, because you don't want to submit a proposal favorably and you fail to ask for the right amount of money. And you come up short. You don't want that to happen. By the same token, you don't want to ask for the moon when all you really need is a little sliver. Okay, so you want to be on target. You want to make sure that you have included a budget and that you're coming up with costs that are reasonable. And again, this is when your sponsored research office is going to be extraordinarily helpful. They're going to be able to help you figure out your budget, and also you're going to need them to submit the fast lane proposal. They're going to have to do it. They are the ones who ultimately submit your proposal for you through the portal, the electronic portal. And so there'll be different requirements on campuses, different campuses for timing. Some places might require you to start communicating with your sponsored research office months in advance. Others might be able to accommodate you within weeks. It really depends on the university and the campus that you're on. And then lastly, this very important bullet here I've included: be nice to your sponsored research officer. They can help you tremendously, and they will be a source of information for you throughout this process. So be kind to them. Okay, and this is, again, more information on the actual office itself. They are the ones who have the fiduciary responsibility and authority to make this submission possible. They, again, will help you with your budget, and they'll help you understand some of the requirements that are not going to be so obvious, why we're asking for this and that kind of information. The typical components of the research proposal are extensive. This list looks daunting, and it is. I want you to understand that in submitting a proposal, you don't just decide on Monday, hey, I think I want to submit Friday, the deadline. It's not going to work. This is something that you have to have planned out for some time and given adequate attention to over a period of time. There are pieces that have to be in place in order for the submission to be competitive and in order for it to be acceptable to the National Science Foundation. There may be certain solicitations that you're interested in applying to that have additional requirements. So these are what I've included here for you to look at, are the typical pieces of the proposal. the project summary, the project description, which is 15 pages. That's the bulk of your proposal. The facilities, equipment, and resources page, your postdoctoral mentoring plan, your data management plan. All of these have to be included. And, you know, they are I guess the basic foundation for submitting the proposal, but there will be other kinds of announcements or solicitations that require something additional. So again, important to read what that solicitation is calling for. Okay, and again, this is, I think I haven't said all of this. Let me just reiterate that the proposal award and policies procedures guide will spell out some of the specific budget categories that you're allowed to request money for. So it'll be clear, you can ask for money to support your graduate students. You can ask for money to help you take on a research project in lieu of a course. You can do that up to a certain degree. You can ask for money for an equipment need to enable you to do your research. So there are different categories that will be spelled out in that guide. There are personnel costs that you are allowed to ask for as well. You may have a senior co-PI, you may have a graduate research assistant. You know, there are indirect costs that your university will require you to ask for as well. So all of this is something that requires careful attention and working with a sponsored research office. And they will, again, help you to understand all of this. The other piece that I want to mention, just because it's fairly recent, though not new, is the need for your research proposal to include a data management plan. This is the world that we're living in. I mentioned the ubiquity of data previously, and here this is our way of trying to do a better job of collecting and then sharing information. And the data management plan allows us to do this. It is a mandatory piece of proposals these days. So please be sure to address this in all of your proposals that you submit. The important, I guess the really important point about your proposal is that it has to reach and meet the criteria. These are our review criteria: intellectual merit and broader impacts. These are critical pieces of your proposal. And this is where in your project summary, your project description, which is 15 pages long, this is where you will articulate the intellectual merit and the broader impacts. The intellectual merit is about how you have proposed to advance the scientific understanding of whatever question you're pursuing at this time. How is the research likely to move forward as a result of the work that you are proposing to do? You know, what are some of the pieces of your proposal that are innovative, original, creative? And people will be evaluating your proposal on the basis of which it's able to make it a compelling case for what's being proposed. How organized are your thoughts? All of this is information that you will be judged on in the intellectual merit criteria. The other criterion is for broader impacts. And some people have a little bit of, I guess, ambivalence about this, but this is a merit review criteria that is just as important as our intellectual merit one. And really, there are multiple ways of articulating broader impacts. You can demonstrate the societal impacts from the work you're proposing, if there are some that you can see. You can talk about that. How does this benefit society? You know, given that you're doing this, proposing to do this work. Perhaps your project will benefit or contribute to enhanced teaching and learning. Maybe that's where your project has its strength. That might be the broader impact for your project. Maybe your project will allow other investigators to acquire data and to use data in ways that they haven't traditionally been able to do. That's another kind of broader impact. So you can see on this list here that there are various ways, and this is also information that is included in the proposal award and procedures guide. So you can spend some time. This is an important criteria that your proposal will be judged on, broader impacts. Okay, it's important to point out that there are some mistakes that people readily make, and I want to make sure that you don't make those mistakes. These are some of the pitfalls that we want you to avoid. You know, be sure to pay attention to the solicitation. I can't stress enough how important it is to read the fine print and make sure that you have fulfilled all of the requirements for the solicitation that you're applying to. When you submit the project description, you have got to be specific about your methods and your predictions. Don't assume that everybody knows what you're talking about, because people will review it and say, this is underspecified. That's a very common piece of feedback that's given by reviewers. The methodology was underspecified or unspecified. You cannot assume that your reviewer or panelist or anybody who's looking at your proposal is going to understand what you need. So you have got to be detailed and specific and describe in great detail what your data analysis plan is. What do you plan to do? Don't tell them you'll figure it out when you get to that point. They want to know from the beginning to the end, how are you going to accomplish this proposed project that you've outlined? And then you need to tell people how likely it is you're going to do it. There's nothing wrong with including some power tests in the proposal to give people a sense of how likely it is that you'll accomplish what you are proposing to accomplish. Be aware that if you're submitting your proposal to a solicitation that is in a traditional disciplinary program, it's going to be reviewed differently. So if for example, you're submitting to the sociology program or the economics program, you can be assured that the people who are reviewing your proposal are coming from the discipline of sociology, the discipline of economics. Now, those are broad-ranging disciplines, so you could have people who have different expertise in each of those disciplines, but they will be the ones who will review your proposal. That's very different from submitting a proposal, for example, to one of the big ideas. Let's say you submit a proposal to the future of work at the human technology frontier big idea. You can be assured that the people who are reviewing your proposal are coming from a range of disciplines. So you may have a sociologist, but you will probably also have someone who is an engineer and someone who is a computer scientist who are going to be reacting to your proposal, because that proposal was supposed to be multidisciplinary and supposed to outline a convergent approach to doing research. So keep that in mind, that your audience matters, who you are tailoring that project to, and for whom that solicitation is coming from. Okay, these are some myths. I just want to debunk them quickly, and I'm just about at the end here, guys. I appreciate your patience. The NSF, this is a myth. We fund researchers across a range of institutions. I included one of those awards from the University of Memphis. So we fund a broad swath of institutions. You should not be put off if you're not currently affiliated with an elite institution. We fund investigators at the beginning of their career and throughout their careers. So we do not fund only famous people. We are proud to say that we have funded every single Nobel awardee in economics going back to about 1993 at the beginning of their career. Everyone who's gotten an economics Nobel Award has gotten funding from NSF early on in their career. Keep in mind that people receive declinations often, or more often than not, just given our success rate. The funding rate for the foundation is about 20%. That means a lot of people are getting declinations. And that means that you need to put that aside and think about a proposal to be resubmitted another time. That just because you were declined once or twice or 3 times doesn't mean you're always going to be declined. And advisory committees do not make funding decisions. They give us advice on our operations and on the way that we engage with the research community, but they don't make funding decisions. You should, if you receive a declination, you put it aside, maybe the next day read your reviews, because it can be kind of devastating to get that because you worked so hard on submitting that proposal and then you get a decline. Put it aside, shake it off, and then come back to it, read the reviews, and think about what the reviewers have said and consider whether or not these are changes that you can make that are reasonable. And understand that persistence does pay off. Think about how you can address those changes. And maybe you can't. Maybe you have to rescope the entire project. But more than likely, that's not the case. More than likely, there are specific places that you can fix and readdress and re-examine. And then schedule a time to talk with the program director. Email the program director with a request to go through the kinds of changes that you'd like to make. Now, understand that this is not about schmoozing with the program director. This is not what this is about. It's about getting from them a sense of whether or not these kinds of these changes you're going to make, these edits are going to be useful edits and meaningful ones and worthwhile, and whether there's something that you missed in reading the reviewer feedback. Maybe there's something the program director will remember in the discussion of the proposal, and that often is the case. They'll remember the discussion of the proposal and they can't capture everything in that review feedback you get. So it's often useful to talk to the program director. Not always, you don't have to, but it may be useful. Okay, I am finished with that and on target here. I'd like to allow for or ask you if you have questions. Jesse, you can manage this process however you'd like to do it, so we can maybe get to as many people as possible.
Yes, perfect. So the way that I like to start is that a number of you provided questions during the presentation, and so let's start off with those. And then after that, if there are additional ones of you who want to ask questions, please raise your hands in the Zoom box and I will unmute you so you can ask your question. Or you can also put your question in the chat box too, if you would like. So we're going to start off with one question, which is the most common one that came up. Are your slides going to be made available?
Yeah, you guys are going to record. You've recorded this, right, Jesse?
That's right. That's right. Yes. So I can
Yeah.
get the slides from you. I'll put that on the same website where we put the recording. Great.
Great.
Wonderful.
Super.
The second question is, are there separate contact points at NSF for each of the big ideas? For example,
Yes.
who can we contact for the human technology frontier research?
Yes. So what I would recommend is going to the website and then looking. If you go through, you'll see all of the program directors who are affiliated with that big idea, along with their directorate affiliation. And so what you would want to do is to reach out to the program director within SBE who is affiliated with that big idea.
Okay. Does NSF sponsor secondary data analysis?
Yes, to a certain degree. You would have to talk with the program director, and we would want to see evidence of some clear advance over what it is you are what has been done previously. But certainly, we recognize that data is valuable, and the fact that somebody else has utilized it is certainly not a strike against it. So yes, for the project, I'm thinking that this kind of project might fall within the, I don't know, I guess it could be any disciplinary area. I'm not sure who asked the question, but if it is a data project, so if it's for the human harnessing the data revolution, or if it's in one of our more data-oriented programs in SBE like MMS, Methodology, Measurement, and Statistics, or our Human Networks and Data Science program, talking with the program director directly is a good idea. But in general, I would say yes.
I don't feel comfortable reaching out to the program director. Isn't that an imposition on his or her time to send my one-pager?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I can't stress to you the value of doing that. I mean, that really is, it's part of our job. We are, that's part of the outreach that we do. And, we need proposals in our portfolio. I'm not saying that we're short of proposals by any means, given the funding rate, But we, we recognize the value of inquiries. And so please don't feel that way. You should do that. Now, the imposition is if you start calling and leaving lots of messages on the phone and they haven't gotten back to you when, at this particular time, what have you. But the email is perfect because they can read carefully what it is you're submitting with enough time to be thoughtful about the feedback they give you and to tell you honestly whether this is an idea that's likely to be competitive or not. So I strongly encourage you to do that.
How can I get involved as a peer reviewer, and what are the benefits of doing so?
Yeah, I think that it's a good idea because it gives you a sense. The benefit is that it gives you a sense of the kinds of proposals that are coming in. And as a reviewer, you can see what's out there. And by contacting the program director, you can be included within our reviewer portal. And so we have an electronic system that allows program directors to kind of go in and see who has reviewed previously. Now we also keep track of people who've agreed to review and have submitted good reviews, and we keep track of those who don't. So if if you're asked to do a review, you can certainly decline the invitation, but don't agree to do it and then not submit a review because that's not a good thing for you or for us. So I think if you're not in our reviewer database, and you may not be able to know this or not, if you haven't gotten an invitation thus far, you would contact a program director who is managing a portfolio relevant to your discipline. And then you can submit an email to them, send them an email and say, hey, I'm interested in being a reviewer. This is my area of expertise, in one sentence or two sentences. And you can even include your CV or abbreviated CV. And then they'll take that information and put it in the reviewer database. They may have a proposal at that time and send it to you, but they will certainly put your information in our reviewer database, because one thing we're always doing is looking to expand that database and have reviewers who, as our technologies become more sophisticated, we begin answering more challenging questions. And those are new questions that don't necessarily have an established review community already. So having new reviewers in the system is something that I think we are constantly trying to keep up with.
This is a question from one of the registrants from before. Studies are often funded because they address a social problem, yet that can require framing a population in a deficit-oriented manner. How can we adhere to strengths-based values of communities while writing in a way that speaks to funders?
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge. I think that is something that you get better at the more you do it. I think we typically have, if you're submitting a proposal to a standing call, which is, say, one of our disciplinary programs that they have a call in the spring, they have a call in the fall. That's one way, that's one kind of submission, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. The other types of activities that I shared with you, like the big ideas, the cross-directorate activities, some of the special announcements do require a certain frame. They do require sometimes you to propose to solve some kind of intractable problem, right? And those are the ones that, the real challenge is often in getting it down to 15 pages. But it's something you should keep in mind that everybody is challenged with. Everyone has to endure that. But also recognize that it's less, I think, of an issue when you're submitting to the straight disciplinary traditional core funding program that has this rolling announcement in the spring, in the fall, where you are proposing a new idea. That's different than, say, a special call for sustainable regional engineering systems or something like that, where you are asked to solve some kind of problem. So I don't have a ready answer for you other than to say that, I think that problem is less acute when you submit to the core programs, but when you do submit to a funding opportunity that does require you to propose a solution to a problem, recognize that everyone is challenged by that constraint. That makes you feel a little bit better.
Does NSF ever fund proposals about comparative cultures or the impact of religion on culture and economics?
Absolutely, absolutely. Comparative cultures, we've got, you know, anthropology. We have a cultural anthropology program in SBE. We have the biological, well, that's less likely to be it, but cultural anthropology, sociology, those are programs that off the top of my head would be likely to review proposals like that. And then the other one, the other question was about the study of religion. What was it? Study of religion on economics or economies?
The impact of religion on culture and economics.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that would be, I think sociology would be the place for that. Absolutely. Our sociology program is a long-standing program that has funded a broad range of work in the discipline. So, excuse me, I would encourage you to take a look at the website and some of the previously funded awards using those keywords, and you'll pull up some of the awards that have fallen in that kind of area, maybe using keywords like religion, economics, culture, and see what some of the previous awards and their abstracts look like.
I'm going to read this question. I don't fully understand it, but maybe you will. GRF focus on quantum science and other areas in which URM students may not be exposed, thus may not be able to compete. Are the other areas still being funded this year? There is a concern that students need to be exposed to a discipline, identify the area of interest, then apply for GRF. How can they do this when the area is relatively new to research education and even their faculty mentors cannot provide guidance on opportunities?
Yeah, I understand the question completely, and I've been a part of multiple discussions about that, and I can only tell you that we were instructed by the administration to do this, and I understand every point you've made in that question is valid, that there are likely to be some people who are going to be disadvantaged as a result of that. And I can say nothing more than that we were instructed to do that. And I understand every point that you've made and agree with them, but that's where we are right now. And, you know, there is the perception that having that focus will help us be stronger as a nation in those disciplines.
What would your recommendation be for a new PhD when considering the scope of a project to submit for funding?
I think I would recommend that the new PhD would look at previously funded work and have a conversation, starting with email. Start with a single page submission to a program director. And then think about whether or not the work is strong enough to be proposed for a career. I didn't talk about career mechanisms in my slides, but I'll just mention that here. It's a good opportunity to do so. The career funding mechanism is an excellent opportunity for a new investigator to obtain research support and to kind of make an impact for themselves, for their department and their university. The career funding mechanism provides support for up to 5 years for pre-tenured researchers. I must say that it is highly competitive, but it's a wonderful, wonderful way of obtaining support that will allow the junior investigator to provide support for graduate students, to incorporate some element of their teaching into their research, and to basically not have to worry about support for 5 years, which is a wonderful, I think, benefit. So that the career funding announcement is something I would certainly encourage a junior investigator to be aware of and to take a look at and consider.
How does NSF view applications from small businesses? Is it best for them to partner with universities?
I think it depends on the area and the focus. We have a small business, SBIR, Small Business and Innovation Research Program, which is housed in engineering, and I would direct interested potential investigators to that program. They will be able to be helpful.
And you may have covered this in your presentation, but what does NSF look for in a PI and co-PI?
We want to make sure that the expertise is there with the project that's being proposed. So if you have co-PIs, we want to see that there is value added to having that person on board. What is it that they are contributing uniquely? What we don't like to see are projects where, in order to answer a certain call, people, scamper and run and find somebody at another university and tack them on at the end and say, hey, look, we've done it. We've got all disciplines represented, or all universities represented, or maybe, we're going to go after a minority serving institution and tack them on at the end because we want to have a broad, we want to say that we're doing something broadly. But in fact, the research itself is really scoped to our campus and our university. So we will be looking at those kinds of contributions that the additional personnel will bring to the project, and want to see justification of the value.
Would any of the grants support international collaborations, such as expenses needed to pay for international sample transfers, etc.?
Yes, we have a Office of International Science and Engineering. That was one, I didn't spend much time with it. I talked about the directorates, the research directorates, and then on the side of that, I'm acting like I can't go back to the slides, forgive me. Maybe I can't. But there is an Office of International Science and Engineering that does in fact fund research according to regions. So it's worth taking a look, at their webpage. Where is it at? Here it is. The Office of, under the Office of the Director, the fourth bullet down says International Science and Engineering. And that office does fund research, and they do so by region of the world. And, depending upon what kinds of research questions, what kinds of activities you're interested in, will determine whether you can find funding with them. Sometimes what they like is for you to submit to, one of the standing programs within, one of the core standing programs within NSF, and then they can partner to co-fund certain international activities. So if you have a disciplinary question that fits within a core program, you may start there and then engage the international office and see what their interest would be in maybe code reviewing, co-funding, or things like that. But we do continue to invest in international partnerships. And, as things change, or don't, but certainly we have a new director within NSF who is very, I think, excited about the potential for new international collaborations. And none of us knows how the November 3rd election is likely to turn out, but all of these have implications for our international involvement and engagement. These changes, these bigger high-level changes that may or may not happen. And so, yes, we do fund those kinds of partnerships in a nutshell, yes, and those kinds of activities involving international partners. But there are constraints, obviously, because we are limited to providing direct support as a PI to PIs who are, that is, investigators who are affiliated with American-based institutions. Now, we do support sub-awardees who can be at internationally based institutions, but the primary award is to a PI, an investigator who is at an American-based institution. The National Science Foundation, like most federal agencies, is supported by taxpayer dollars. So that's what we do.
I believe we have 6 more questions, so let's see if we can.
Let's see if we can get through them.
Yeah, get through them.
Yeah, we could.
Yep.
I could probably do
it's
it.
a hard stop at 11:30. Okay. Under what circumstances may the NSF consider funding for a postdoc to remain at their PhD institution?
So the postdoc fellowship award is to provide postdoctoral support following completion of the PhD. Now, I think generally this is manifested in people going away to another institution to work with this expert or research scholar that they will get some mentoring from. But it may be, I guess, that a special case could be made for staying at the institution. I would recommend communicating with the program director for that program. That would be Dr. Welcome, Josie Welcome, and she would be available in email to answer that question. It may be possible to do that.
Are multi-university projects permitted when endorsed by a larger agency like ACGME?
When ACG, what?
ACGME. I'm not quite sure what that.
What is that organization? I'm not sure what that one is. I can't get that acronym, ACGME. Well, the bottom line is our multiple, I think the question was about whether they can submit proposals from multiple institutions. Is that?
Yeah, I believe that's the bottom line, yeah.
Yeah, and absolutely, absolutely. Those are collaborative, you can submit them as collaborative projects, and we have collaborative research projects, proposals submitted all the time. That does require some coordination among your SROs, because somebody's got to serve as the lead, and then the other institutions, they have to be involved in submitting the requisite forms as well. So once that's determined, absolutely, you can submit a collaborative research proposal.
Okay, ACGMA is Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education. I think the answer is still the same.
Okay.
The next question is, let's see here. As far as data acquisition is concerned, would all data need to be stored in the US, or could they be at an international location as well?
I'm not sure about that. That's an interesting question. So the person is asking whether or not we can, they can receive support that would ultimately have a project where the data would be stored in an international archive. Yeah, I think it would. I think that it would be dependent on the extent to which it is in fact open. Is it open? I mean, if it's open and it's international, I think that's probably fine. But our goal is to ensure access and openness to data over time. So if that international archive is the best place to store that data and make it available to people globally, then I can't see any reason why that would be problematic. Again, I think talking to the program director would be useful.
For the impact to society criterion, does it need to be how it affects American society or global society? In general, what is the attitude to research that is located in a non-US location?
So let me correct you first a little bit, questioner, in that it's not, the criteria is broader impacts. And one way of articulating broader impacts is to talk about and show how it impacts society. But that doesn't have to be the way that you do broader impacts. You can do broader impacts other ways. And I think I shared a couple of other ways that you can show that you have, your research project has broader impacts. It might be that your broader impact is the fact that your research agenda advances people's understanding about certain societal issues. Or it may be that your research itself enables some cohort of graduate students to be exposed to research that they wouldn't previously have been. That might be your broader impact. Whether it has an impact on society is just one way of articulating broader impacts. So the second part of the question, which was about, Jesse, can you repeat that, about international something or other?
Whether it's the attitude to research that is located in a non-US location.
Whether what? I'm sorry.
The attitude to research that
is
located
in a non-research location. So, so you know, we are about science. We're about producing science and helping to enhance the evolution of science. And scientific questions don't have national boundaries on them. I say that at the same time that I know that we all are aware that we are in a moment with a particular administration that you know, may have more specific ideas about national boundaries. And so I think that as an investigator, I would continue to pursue the research that involves some kind of international engagement, and then you know, communicate with the program director about the competitiveness of that proposal. I would not be daunted or fearful that because the research involves some kind of international component, it's not going to be of interest. We continue to support projects involving international partners and involving questions of international interest. Some questions that are out there can only be answered by the engagement of a team that is international. I mean, this is what science is. It doesn't know those kinds of national boundaries. So I would want to encourage the investigator to pursue their work, but to talk candidly with the program director about that proposal.
Are there other graduate fellowship options that students outside of the GRF focus areas that students can apply to this year?
So the Graduate Research Fellowship is unique because it is students submitted. Students submit that. Typically, most of the proposals that we review at NSF are from people who have PhDs or who have a terminal degree, not necessarily a PhD, but terminal degrees. So we do support a lot of graduate students, but we do those typically through standard research awards made to faculty members, made to independent researchers. So that's the next most likely mechanism to support graduate students. It would be through a standard award that an investigator would receive, in which they've allocated in their budget support for graduate students. You might also receive support down the road if this is something that you hadn't thought to do as a faculty member or researcher. You submitted a proposal, you got funding, and then you realize, oh man, I didn't think about asking for support for graduate students. You can actually submit a supplement request. And provided the award is still active, you can receive supplemental funds from that program to enable support for graduate students. And I think at this time, well, not at this exact moment, because this is August 20th, and we are pretty much engaged in all of the steps necessary to close out our budgets for the end of the fiscal year. Prior to now, we have been very open to providing this kind of supplemental support where possible, given the circumstances of this pandemic. And I know a number of investigators have been able to receive some level of support for their graduate students because of the effects of the pandemic. So that that may not be as much as you'd like to hear, but that is, I guess, the next biggest way that we fund graduate students tends to be through those standard awards made to investigators.
Would the grant on underrepresented women and minorities in STEM also accept applications for other sciences like underrepresentation in economics?
So I'm not familiar with that grant. Say the name of that funding mechanism. What is it?
Underrepresented women and minorities in STEM.
Yeah, I don't know that mechanism, but is the person online?
Let's see. Yeah, she is. Let me unmute her and see if she can
articulate maybe a little bit more about what that is.
Martha, would you like to ask the question?
Hi, thank you. I don't remember the number, but there is a grant that sponsors research on underrepresentation of women and minorities in STEM fields. And I was wondering if economics can also be applying to this one.
Yeah, I think, all of our programs, to the extent that investigators, and the extent that program officers are aware of the research the researcher themselves, I would suggest you communicate bottom line with the program director, because this is something that we are all sensitive to in terms of certain fields of science, including economics, including computer science, including several fields in engineering, where we see these stark numbers of people who are not participating in the fields. And so various programs, various disciplines have ways of addressing this. And so I would encourage you, Martha, to reach out to maybe Nancy Lutz, who is the lead program director for our economics program, and see what there may be some things and mechanisms in place that I'm not aware of, but I know that economics has been a field that has grappled with the problem of underrepresentation for women, and also for people who are from groups that are underrepresented in economics as well. So feel comfortable reaching out to Nancy Lutz, L-U-T-Z.
Okay, Dr. Craig Henderson, I want to respect your time. It's 11:31 a.m.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much. This
Oh,
is
it's my
wonderful.
Good.
We really, really, really appreciate it. And thank you also for allowing us to record it. So we are going to have you in perpetuity on our website.
Goodness, I don't know if you want to do that.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
the opportunity. I appreciate everybody being so patient and attentive. And feel free to follow up. Please do. Remember, it's not an imposition. Okay? Take care, Jesse. I'll talk
Right.
with you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.